The story today is about Songololos who didn't live in the compost heap. It was a different family of Songololos. They lived in a forest that was very close to a noisy something. They weren't sure what. Well, on one morning, the little ones decided they're going to go play. So off they went into the forest, out of their little place where they lived. And one of them said, "Let's go to where the noise is coming from." They weren't really sure what kind of noise it was or where it came from. So they made their way through the forest, following the noise. Every now and again they'd stop. They'd listen, and then they'd keep going towards the noise. And as they went, the noise got louder and louder and louder. And then they came to the edge of the forest, and suddenly it was all bright. They had to scrunch up their eyes. It was so bright they could hardly see anything until their little eyes got used to it. And then they looked, and in front of them, wow, no more forest, just sand. Lots and lots and lots of sand. And the noise was coming from something that kept moving. They weren't sure what it was. Then one of them said, "I think this is what my mom and dad told me about. They called it the sea." "Wow, we've come to the sea. That's exciting, let's go." And off they went, running down out of the forest onto the sand, and immediately they slowed right down because they couldn't go fast in the sand. Those lots and lots of feet that they had, they just dug into the sand, and they kept having their bellies scraping on the sand. They had to learn to walk differently on the sand because it was more difficult. Anyway, they made their way down the first little hill and into a dip in the sand. And at the bottom of the dip in the sand, there were lots and lots of pieces of wood. They didn't know then, but it's called driftwood. "Let's play here," they said. Wow. They started moving pieces of wood. They did as much as they could to get themselves a little hut built because the sun was so hot there on that sand. And they all clambered together inside that little hut. Then one by one they went out. And they found that when they went up the next little dune, the next little sand heap, if they curled into a little curl, you know, like Songololos do, they curl into little curls, they could roll right down that little sand dune. And at the bottom, inside the place where their little hut was, they would unfold and then go running all the way up, climbing all the way up that little sand dune, and then into a little curl and rolling all the way down. And that's what they did, and they figured that that was a really fun thing to do. Then one of them, while they were standing at the top waiting, said, "But hang on, the wind is blowing on the other side." And they could hear the wind. And they looked, and they all climbed to the top of that little dune. And they stood there, and suddenly a big gust of wind came. And they were full of sand. It just blew up in their face. It went everywhere on their legs. "Oh, they don't like this," they said, and back they went, all of them together like one big roll of Songololo down the hill, down to where their little hut was, their little cottage in the sand. A little while later they said, "Well, we're getting thirsty now. Let's go see if we can find a place to drink something." They couldn't find anywhere on that sand. Then they said, "But hang on, there's a place just along here that's got some green leaves. Maybe there's some water there." And that's where they went, along the sand dune until they found the green leaves, and they discovered that those were what I suppose we would call them veggies. They were thick green-leaved plants, and there was one that was broken. And the first Songololo that found that broken one went around to it and then discovered that where it was broken, it was wet. And they started drinking of it. Now that kind of stuff is good for Songololos. I don't know if it's good for others, but the Songololos all drank as much as they could. And then they said, "You know, it's getting hot and late. we'd better start making our way back home. Oh, but what about going closer to where the noise comes from, where that white stuff is? They're talking about the water and the foam. That'll have to wait for another day, said the eldest of all the Songololos that was there. We'll come back and we'll play in the water, in the foam, in the thing that makes the noise. And so they all agreed, let's go back home now. Back through the forest they went, up and around the different trees, through the paths, over and above roots, until they got back to where their little house was, and all the neighbors and all the friends' houses. And they burrowed back into their various homes. That night they slept very, very well, dreaming about the time they would go back to the beach. And this time, hopefully, they'd go play in the water. Well, that's it for now. See you again sometime. Bye.